production, a masterclass with Atami Goyan, a booth at the Film Bazaar to promote business-to-business networking opportunities for Indian and Canadian film companies, and a Canada Pavilion with interactive activities at the festival venue. We have with us His Excellency, Mr. Jordan Reeves, who is currently the Consul General for Canada in Mumbai. He joined his position in Mumbai in 2015, and in his current role, he is responsible for promoting Canada-India commercial relations. He joined External Affairs and International Trade Canada in 1994. Festival Director, I request you to come up, Mr. Suneet Tandon, I request you to come up on stage. I asked you to sit.
I thought you were telling me to sit there. That's fine.
Please.
Sorry
Please.
about this.
Sorry about this. We also have Mr. Cameron Bailey, Artistic Director, Toronto International Film Festival, April Mullen, actress and filmmaker, and Johnny Marr, Director. May I now request the Consul General to say a few words?
Absolutely. Now, is this on? Hold on. That's on. Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. And just a quick word. Thank you so much, everyone in the media. You've been fantastic to deal with, and you've been certainly very, very supportive of what we, Canada, is trying to do and hopes to do here in India with the Indian film industry. So it's been fantastic working with you, and thank you for your support right off the bat. Listen, I'm going to start with just very briefly a quick announcement I would like to make, and I'm very happy to make. The Government of Canada, well, let me say, first of all, super pleased that Canada's country of focus here at IFFI, and the Government of Canada has selected now India also to be our country of focus going forward in the cultural sector. And what does that mean? Well, for me, very briefly, it means we've got additional funding from the Government of Canada to do more here in India. It means we've got a full-time cultural officer that will be working out of the Canadian Consulate General in Mumbai. And it means also you will see more of Canada, that Canada is back in this Canada-India cultural space at events like Vicky Frames, Mammy International Film Festival, and also here at IFFI going forward. So we're very excited about that. Very briefly, why are we doing this? Well, the answer is very simple. Because we think we can succeed. There's an awful lot of opportunity. India, as you know, of course, produces the most films, more than any other country in the world. In Canada, television and film industry is worth nearly $10 billion these days. And we've got a lot of foreign productions going on in Canada. Yes, about 3/4 of those are led by American companies. But we see a huge opportunity for India to increase its market share in Canada. At the same time, Canadian films are being filmed in India. And so Sanjay Patel's Union, for example, is being screened here, I think, at this festival. And that's a good example of that. We've got an audiovisual co-production agreement between Canada and India, which offers producers certain incentives, tax incentives on both sides. We've got a world-leading festival in TIFF that Cameron may touch on in a moment. Distinct seasons, and if you know our winter, it's indeed very distinct. Finally, I want to say that for the Government of Canada, why are we doing this? Why is this so important? The Government of Canada is very committed to diversity, celebrating the diversity of our population in Canada. We believe diversity is a strength. And with so many Indians, about almost 1.3 million, Canadians rather, whose families call India home, and a great number of extremely talented individuals. There's some, big names in this industry from Akshay Kumar on down, but also many other unsung, talented individuals in the film space. We feel we've got a great platform to work from, and we're very excited about moving forward. Last thing I wanted to mention, for those of you who are looking at the education space, you'll know that recently we announced that there are now more than 100,000 Indian students studying at Canadian colleges and universities. Quite a number of those are indeed going to film schools in Canada. And last week, when our Minister for International Trade was in India, he announced, along with the Vancouver Film School, new Vancouver Film School campuses opening in both Mumbai and Hyderabad. So in the skilling space, we want to do a lot more as well as part of this initiative going forward. It's Canada's birthday. We're celebrating 150 years. So I just wanted to say thank you for inviting us to be Country of Focus this year. I think it's a great time and place to begin this initiative and to move forward promoting cultural cooperation, especially in film, between our two countries. Very last thing, I just wanted to note that Air Canada is in the room. Air Canada has been a great partner for us, specifically in helping to bring productions and producers together from both our countries. They've been a super supporter. Margaret from London is here. They're the, of course, only airline now with direct flights between India and Canada, between Mumbai, Toronto, Delhi, Vancouver, and those flights will become daily very soon. And Air Canada has just been incredibly supportive. They'll be sponsoring, for example, our Canada reception later at IFFI. But I also know for a fact, for producers, Canadian producers, Indian producers, they're looking to move people between the two countries and crews. Air Canada has indeed been very, very supportive, and you should contact Air Canada if you've got projects you're looking at. So I'm going to wrap up there, and I'm going to hand the microphone over to, I guess, Mr. Cameron Bailey, correct? Okay. Artistic Director at the Toronto International Film Festival. Cameron, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jordan. Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for coming. This is actually my second time in India in the course of 1 month, my third time this year, so I'm very pleased to be back. I spent a lot of time in this country, but it's my first time at the IFFI Goa in many, many years, and I'm pleased to see old colleagues and friends like Mr. Sune Tandon, here, as well as some of the many filmmakers and journalists like Mr. Chatterjee here in the audience today. We are so happy to be presenting a focus on Canadian film here at IFFI Goa. This is, for me, the culmination of a kind of a bridge that we have been building at TIFF between Canada and India and our respective film industries for many, many years. As many of you will know, we have been playing both commercial and independent films from India at the Toronto International Film Festival for many, many years, going back to Kavialva de Nakena, Lagan premiered at our festival. More recently, films like Dobhi Ghat, Kiran Rao's film with Amir Khan, made its world premiere in Toronto. This year, we premiered the new film by Anurag Kashyap, Mukkabaz, and a wonderful film that I believe is playing here as well, called Village Rockstars by Rima Das. So there are many, many films that have made the trip from India to Canada, and now we're thrilled to be bringing some films from Canada here to India. There are 8 independent films that we're showing as a part of this spotlight, in addition to the retrospective devoted to Atom Egoyan. What I think is one of the main distinctions between the Canadian industry and the Indian film industry is that India has a massive commercial film industry, hundreds and hundreds of films made every year to an audience of 1 billion. And as well as an independent film industry, which we're seeing increasingly in the films that are playing internationally at festivals. In Canada, we have a much smaller population than you do in India, so we have kind of outsourced our commercial industry in many ways to the US in terms of people like Denis Villeneuve and Ryan Gosling, who just made that wonderful Canadian film called Blade Runner 2049 with a Canadian director and a Canadian star. But the independent sector really is where our filmmakers thrive, and they do it with the support of Telefilm Canada, the national agency, which is also supporting this retrospective here and the spotlight on Canadian films. But the independence of Canadian filmmakers allows them to pursue their own stories. It allows them to tell stories that are meaningful to them, and it takes them all over the world. Johnny Ma has directed a film in China. Films by Canadian filmmakers that we show at our festival are being made in India, in South Korea, in Latin America, all over the world. And these are all Canadian films. That is a part of the diversity that Jordan was speaking about. Canadians come from all different corners of the world, all different walks of life. And you see that in Canadian films because the filmmakers are telling stories that are personal to them, that reflect their own unique perspectives on the world. And that is something that I think the Canadian industry shares in common with some of the independent Indian filmmakers that we're now seeing more and more become successful around the world. We're thrilled to be doing this. I hope that if you haven't already, you'll get a chance to see some of the Canadian films while you're here. And I think now I would like to pass it on to Johnny Ma, the director of Old Stone. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for IFFI, the film festival, and Telefilm, and Canadian Consulate, and also TIFF for putting it all together, because, I mean, with this many organizations, usually impossible, but they've done it. And I feel like that kind of support for Canadian filmmakers is something that I've always sort of spoken about to my friends who are filmmakers around the world, because, I mean, for TIFF, I was born in China, but I grew up in Canada, and to be always sort of be supported as a Canadian filmmaker, no matter what I do, as long as it's personal, that it's always just very, it makes me, help me take more chances. And I think one of my best friend, Richie Mehta, who's Indian, also, he made 2 films here in India, and they're very beautiful films, and I think that they're successful here as well as in Canada. I'm really excited to present my film here. For me personally, this is my second time in India, and the first time was 10 years ago, and actually I wasn't even in this industry, and something happened to me here that allowed me to sort of take a chance and go into sort of filmmaking. So to me, this is sort of a homecoming as well. And also for this particular film, we shot it in China, where it's a pretty similar, very fast-moving industry, a country, and really, I think that I remember this film had played in Mumbai before, and I remember the feedback from it was that the audience really responded to it. So I hope, I'm really excited to see sort of the audience feedbacks on this. So thank you very much, and April.
Thank you so much for having me, IFFI. It's been wonderful. It's my very first time in India, and it's been such an incredible experience. I feel very honored to be here and be a part of Canada's Focus. I've been so fortunate for the last 2 decades. I've been able to produce, direct, and act in feature films independently with the support of the government, Telefilm Canada, the OMDC, and publicly as well. As a female filmmaker, there is such strong support for writers and producers and for women to tell their stories. And, I think that has allowed me so much creative freedom. And I look forward to bridging the gap between India and Canada. I hope to shoot here one day. It's absolutely stunning, every corner of your country. And I also look forward to bringing you over to our side to shoot on our land, because it's absolutely grand and very safe, and the crews there are incredible talents, and I look forward to all of that. Thank you for having me.
I'd just like to share that, as you're all aware, most of you have been to the IFFI over the decades and seen festivals from, I suppose, the 80s, 90s onwards, as indeed have I. So it's a great pleasure to welcome a fellow festival hand, Cameron. I think we started our careers at about the same time. I took a big break in between from festivals, and now I seem to have been plunged back into it. So it's a great pleasure to meet Cameron Bailey, whom I met when I was deputy director in the film festivals a long time ago, and he just joined the Toronto Festival, and look where he is. And he's doing such wonderful work. It's a great festival which has always welcomed Indian cinema. It has grown to be one of the most important festivals of the world, and so we're delighted that you've curated this package of 8 films especially for us, for the Focus. Thank you, Jordan, for being here, for the great support of the Canadian government in organizing this, to Telefilm Canada, to TIFF, all our gratitude, and our gratitude to all of you to come. You know that we do a country focus every year. Last year it was Korea. This year we've been approached by a country or 2. I will not mention which they are until the talks go a little further. But it's a very important section of our festival. Last year, the Korean section had, I think, about quite a large number of films and a very large delegation. This year, we have a significant delegation from Canada as well, and 8 films in the Focus section, all recent films. And we are really delighted. We've been trying. We would have loved to have done a little more, but because I think there were some constraints on time and so on and so forth, we have done whatever we can, and we are truly grateful to you for all the help and cooperation we have received. I hope that you will all enjoy the films that are in the section, that you will interact with the Canadian delegation which has come, and that this will somehow help us in growing our bonds, as Jordan said. Looking forward. And thank you, Jordan, for your announcement of the fact that India is now becoming a focus country for you in terms of culture, and that you have increased funding for doing that. So I think we can look forward to a lot more of Canada over the coming years. And I'm glad that this focus is a sort of a turning point, perhaps, in that process. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the floor is open for question and answers. Please, one at a time, please.
My question goes.
Yes.
Yeah, my question goes to Jordan. Sure. You said that there will be a cultural focus. Canada will focus on cultural. Do you look at making a ease in visa, this one or something like that?
Okay, well, absolutely. You know, when it comes to co-productions, right, that we're specifically trying to promote between Canada and India, absolutely. Our team at the consulate will be on hand to help with that visa process. So, I mean, the answer is yes, because we want to encourage these co-productions. And our team of wonderful people that work on the visas here in India, and there are a lot of them these days, a lot of people traveling back and forth, are very much supportive of having this relationship, especially for co-productions, go forward. So they're definitely a part of the team and a part of the strategy, if you like, going forward.
Yeah, very good. Very good afternoon, sir. My question is to you, addressed to you. Since you told now India has become Canada country focus, just I want to add one common assumption in Indian audience. Whatever we consume in English language, release, everything we have a tendency that is produced in US or come from Hollywood. So what's this strong differentiate you try to make? What are the over the years that's overshadowed Hollywood? What are the strategies you are using? And one more thing I wanted to ask you, since the most celebrated commercial filmmaker in the world is James Cameron, he is from Canada origin. Can we expect anything, his movie made purely made in Canada instead of US or collaborated from New Zealand with Peter Jackson? Yeah, thank you.
I don't
We'll
know
make
if
the.
anyone else wants to comment on part of that question, but
Sure. There is incredible talent that comes out of Canada every year. And so you're right. James Cameron was born and raised in Canada. I mentioned Denis Villeneuve, who's made one of the biggest films of the year. There are so many others as well. Ryan Gosling, Ryan Reynolds, Rachel McAdams, so many on-screen and behind-the-scenes talent that comes out of Canada, often is trained in Canada at Canadian colleges and universities, and then goes on to great success in Hollywood or around the world. We're a very small population. The population of even just Bombay and Delhi is already more than all of Canada. So that's important to recognize. And what that means is that we can't support the kind of massive commercial industry that you can here in India or they can in the US. So our talent, when they want to make those big $200 million movies like Mr. Cameron does, they go to Hollywood. I'm hoping that some of them will also come to India when they want to make big commercial films as well. What we do in Canada is a little bit different, smaller scale, but with a lot of imagination, a lot of emotion in the films, and great scripts, great talent working in Canada in independent films.
yeah. And just to mention on the Canadianness part of your question, if I understood correctly, diversity is part of the equation for Canada, and we really are serious about that, and we really value the contribution that Indo-Canadians and other Indians coming to Canada to make films do make. So I think it was Deepika Padukone who, I believe, right, launched a film this past year in Toronto. It was one of her first, it was a directorial debut for her. But she chose Toronto and chose the subject in an Indian living in Toronto, going back to his home. But there's so many stories between our two countries that I think it's a wonderful place to start. I think film has huge potential in terms of bringing people together, telling one another stories, and communicating across cultures, across countries. And we really believe in that. And we want to support that. And that's part of the reason why we're so keen to support this collaboration with the Indian film industry going forward.
I'm very sorry to interrupt, but I have to be going because there's another engagement which is awaiting me. But please do carry on, and thank you once again for your wonderful support. And we look forward to the Focus on Canada. There's a red carpet starting at about 2:15, I think, this afternoon. So please do come for the opening of the Focus on Canada. That's all I want to say. I want to encourage you all to be there. Thank you. Please carry on. Please carry on. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Clayton. I'm from the United States, and I'm a social media representative. On my page, I post History of Cinema. That's the name of the page. And I notice there's a lot of enthusiastic coming from the east to the west. But from the west to the east, there's a little resistance. What can we do to break this barrier, talking about public? Because as you know, social media right now is a very good thermometer to see if people enjoy or not. So what can you do to break this barrier?
Any thoughts on that?
Are you talking about Western interest in Eastern culture, Eastern films, for instance? Okay, I see. You know, I would say that from my vantage point, I actually see quite a lot of interest. At our festival, we show films from 70, 75 countries every year. There's a lot of interest in films coming from Asia. As Jordan mentioned, we show several films from India every year. Massive interest in films from countries like China, South Korea, Japan. There are lots of people growing up who are growing up on anime from Japan. They're growing up on Bollywood films, not just people of Indian background themselves, but people who are just into the movies. They like the excitement of the films, and I'm seeing that more and more. So from our perspective, Canadians generally are very open to culture and movies from all over the world, and there's a special interest growing now in terms of films from Asia because more and more Canadians have a connection to Asian countries, either through family, through their own education, and so I think there's more and more curiosity.
So is it only, Mr. Cameron, is it only because, they have roots here in India or in other Asian countries, or is it that, they are finding some similarities between Canadian cinema and Indian cinema? Yes.
I would say that the best Indian cinema, like the best of all cinema, is universal. I was here recently with my family. My wife is Chinese Canadian. Our son is a mix of Chinese and West Indian, African Canadian. And we watched Dangal on the way here, and we watched PK. And my son, who's 8 years old, loved both movies. He now thinks Amir Khan is his favorite actor, massive star. And he was just entranced by the films. He'd never seen a film from India before. And I think that is repeated countless times among Canadians. I think there's a curiosity, there's an openness to films from all over the world. And once you see them, you see how they connect to your own life.
So is it because of the common universal values which people are finding in both the cinemas?
Yeah, like I say, I think when cinema is working at its best, it speaks to anyone everywhere because it is such an emotional medium. It can reach you on levels that you can't even articulate sometimes verbally. And I think cinema has that power to reach across linguistic and cultural divides.
I would like to invite Hugh Cripson and Roxana Smith to come up on stage, please.
More Canadians.
There. Hugh, please. We can continue with the Q&A session. Next question, please.
Hello. Yeah, Cameron. My question to you here. Since you are associated with the Toronto International Film Festival, what are the major differences you see between the Toronto International Film Festival and the international film festivals that happen in India?
This is maybe something that the Canadian filmmakers here could also speak to, because I think in just about every case they've played at our festival as well. We are a large international festival. As I said, we show films from many different countries. We've got a range of films from very small budget, no budget experimental films to films like The Martian, massive global blockbusters, all might launch at our festival. That's maybe one of the differences. I think in most cases, though, we're all trying to do the same thing. We love cinema. We're trying to present to audiences cinema that they might not see other places that are maybe a little bit outside of the commercial mainstream, and we're trying to engage our audiences. I think all festivals are trying to do the same thing.
Hi, my question is to all of you. I'm from CNN News 18. You know, India and Canada has an official co-production treaty which was signed back in 2014. But, you know, we haven't seen much on that part. Also, do you think, you know, we could also come up with such treaties more so that we can, you know, increase the collaboration between the two countries?
I totally agree. Yes, there have not been many official co-productions under the treaty. There's certainly been a lot of projects and informal co-productions between the two countries, and a lot of activity continues. So I think, to be very frank, we haven't done a good enough job to explain the treaty to producers, for example, Indian producers, and how they can take advantage of that. And so beginning this year at FICCI Frames and a little bit later during IFFI as well, we are organizing a co-production session where we're going to be speaking in depth about that. And we've been bringing over a number of Canadians from Telefilm Canada and others also to speak to this. And I think partly it's an education that needs to be, we need to improve the information we put out there, but also it's about ourselves, and we can play a role. Government of Canada can play a role working with our Indian government counterparts, but also to find some champions, perhaps in Canada, that can offer those concierge services to Indian producers, to one-stop shop, to make things much simpler. So this is part of the plan, and there is indeed a plan out there, and we're very enthusiastic about it. We're definitely promoting the co-production treaty. You're correct, what you said. But it is an important part of our focus going forward, and we're confident we will see some official co-productions going forward in the near future.
Hi, my name is Murtaza. I'm an independent film critic. I have a question each for Mr. Reeves and Mr. Bailey. I'll start with Mr. Reeves. Firstly, I would like to congratulate both IFFI as well as Canada for honoring a filmmaker like Atom Egoyan, having grown up watching someone like him and David Cronenberg. It's a great moment that he's actually coming to India. My question is, you touched upon that very many film schools are being opened up in India. Do you have any plans in place for scholarships to younger filmmakers or film students which can help fast track their career to begin with?
That's a great question, and my Tara, who heads our commercial section in the Canadian Consulate, is saying yes. So Tara, we've got scholarships, plans for scholarships to support.
Available for Indian filmmakers, both full scholarships and partial scholarships for Indian filmmakers with a particular focus on women. And we'll certainly let you know, and please pass your card to Jayita, and she'd be happy to tell you about that.
Excellent, excellent. Cameron, any further?
I think you may have a second question, but I'll just briefly speak to that as well. I think it's any Indian filmmaker who's interested in studying in Canada should absolutely do that. And you may know that we have expertise in many different areas, live action, but also animation is very strong in Canada. Very good place to study. We also have something at TIFF called a Talent Lab, which we run every year. It's a select group of filmmakers from both Canada and all over the world. There have been Indian filmmakers who've been a part of it. So I would encourage you, if you're interested, if you're an Indian filmmaker, to apply to the Talent Lab at TIFF as well.
My second question is basically to you as a film critic. You are an accomplished film critic, and film criticism over the years hasn't evolved or isn't as organized as, say, filmmaking or other disciplines. So I just wanted to know your thoughts on this aspect of film criticism, how important it is and how important it is to evolve it as a discipline or as an organized field like filmmaking or other areas.
It's been many years since I earned my living as a film critic. It's harder and harder to do that now, actually. But I did spend almost 20 years as a film critic. It is an essential part of film culture. Film critics allow us to understand the many different ways that films work. They can illuminate films when they're working at their best. And I think it's more than just a score, more than just a number, 90%. Whatever it might be, or a number of thumbs or stars or anything like that. I think the depth into which films, into which film critics go when they analyze and illuminate films is really important. It certainly helped me understand films, and I think filmmakers actually appreciate it as well when the critics fully engage with their work.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say it's just a wonderful relationship to when a film critic understands and challenges the filmmaker, and it pushes, I think, both sides, you know. And so to me, it's sort of it's a full circle, and so I don't see that going away anytime soon. I mean, there are things that are changing in the film, like making circle as well as the film critics, but that relationship of that, both the antagonistic and also the interdependent, is, I think, is always going to be there.
Hi, I'm Meenakshi from the Pioneer newspaper in New Delhi. Congratulations and welcome to India. My question is to anyone who can answer this, please. There is a huge Indian population in Canada. How much of your local cinema is actually made around the Indian diaspora? And if you have any celebrated Indian directors who are being celebrated in Canada?
I can speak to that a little bit. So we have done a lot at our film festival every September to bring big Indian films and some of the biggest stars. Priyanka Chopra was recently at our festival. We've had many others in the past. We're now branching out and trying to do that at our home. It's called the Tiff Bell Lightbox, which is a 5-screen multiplex that we have in Toronto as well. We recently opened Secret Superstar Day and Date with its global release, and we were very pleased to do that. That was the first time we'd ever done that. We hope to do more of that. And, you know, there is, of course, a big audience in Canada, in all of the big cities, certainly in Toronto and Vancouver especially, for global Indian films. When they release here, they're releasing there often on the same day, and there are massive audiences. And as I said before, it's not just people who have an Indian background in their own families. It's people who are just interested in the movies and know that there's some great ones.
And, of course, we have wonderful directors like the acclaimed Deepa Mehta as well, who comes to India frequently and has been also a huge supporter of collaboration between producers, directors, filmmakers, between both countries.
Hello. This refers to the question and answer regarding the change in attitude of filmmakers and films from India in Canada. See, I had an occasion to read about the migration from 1980s, as well as the latest one is the diversification in the Vancouver Film School. So many disciplines. So this may have an effect for the ecosystem there. Do you agree with that?
I'm not sure. I think that
I'll put a supplementary. Canada is considered the backwaters of US. But in filmmaking, you can have your own idiom.
Oh, yes.
So that's the point. And there are many settlers. For example, from my state, Karnataka, so many have settled there. If it is the third generation in America, it is the second generation in Canada. So how you catch the elements from those and have it, we can say, made in India.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go ahead.
There is a growing generation of filmmakers working in Canada who have background in India. You mentioned Deepa Mehta. Of course, she's made many films, often about India, even if she's not shooting here for practical reasons. Water, I think, was probably the most recent celebrated example. Richie Mehta is another one. I think he'll be here in Goa shortly, and his film Amal is, I think, one of the most beautiful films I've seen in recent years that was set in India, made by someone who lived abroad. So there are many other filmmakers like that as well. There's Nisha Pahuja, a documentary filmmaker who's also making really important films, often about India from a diasporic perspective. So that does continue, and that is, I think, one of the distinct characteristics of Canadian cinema, is that curiosity about the rest of the world. Hollywood cinema, by comparison, is often not as curious. It doesn't display the same kind of interest in a global outlook that Canadian filmmakers do.
Yeah, I just wanted to offer one comment, and this is just as a Canadian who grew up and spent my life in Canada, that I remember when I was much younger, partially because there were so many American productions, American television shows dominating the airwaves and so on and so forth. There was an endless debate about what is Canadian culture. I really feel that we've moved beyond that, and that most Canadians today are very proud of the fact that Canada is a very open and welcoming country with people from all over the world, and it's that flavor that is Canadianness today, and that we're so proud of, and that's the whole point about the valuing diversity. Anyway, that's just my perspective on this, but I think that Canadians don't dwell so much anymore upon what is Canadian culture and what is Canadianness. We just are, and we're from all over the world, and we're interested in different parts of the world, and that flavor really characterize, I think, what Canada is producing these days.
Yeah, and for myself, I mean, I'm a second generation Chinese. I was born in China, and I grew up in Toronto with my best friend was Jamaican, Mexican, and native Canadian, and actually there were just so many different countries, and I feel like growing older after living in other places like New York and LA, I realized other countries are so different, like people are so separated. So I feel like that was something that was really special about growing up in Canada, and I think that it's even more exciting seeing sort of stories about sort of trying to make a life in Canada, and I think that those are pretty special as well. So I mean, for me, I mean, like you just mentioned, it's just the fact that TIFF and Canada, the government has made it a thing that this is our power. I would say diversity that is very special, I think, of this country. Thank you.
Should I ask? Anybody can ask me. Anyone can give the answer. Hollywood and Bollywood and the Chinese cinemas are very rich today. In Canada, what type of people like the films? Are the music, are the story, are the making of a film, are the subject of a film? What they like more audience in Canada?
April, what do Canadians like? Yeah, what do the Canadians like? What are they looking for in film? What sort of?
Well, it was interesting when he was saying, why is there a gap between the East and the West? Truly, I think as a Canadian filmmaker and creator and artist, we really seek outward for inspiration. So we hope to see international film, and the film festivals allow that. And we love coming to see IFI because there's international talent that really inspires us as artists, and we have this identity as being diverse. And this is part of our exploration as filmmakers, is really I was 5 years old watching Wong Kar-wai, and I was, you are instantly, maybe 12, maybe 14, but you draw from all over the world as a Canadian because you're surrounded by that.
Can I just add one quick thing on the subject of diversity? We're very proud of diversity in Canada. We think we have made a lot of strides that some other countries are still struggling with in terms of accommodating a wide range of people. But India did it well before we did. India has such a range of languages and cultures and histories within it. And I think we have to make sure that we also acknowledge other countries that have much, much deeper roots in diversity than Canada does. I think we're doing well, but we're very new.
Last question. Okay, is there a question?
My question is for Jordan. Do you have, any strategy in place to ensure that Canadian films actually get released in India commercially? Because no cash transactions are happening when you have cultural exchange, and in the Indian market it's just Bollywood and Hollywood.
Yeah.
So Western film, non-Hollywood Western cinema has always found it difficult to penetrate this market. So do you talk to distributors, exhibitors in Mumbai to figure out?
Well, yes. And so, on that, we're just starting this initiative now. And so I think that's where things like, Film Bazaar or Ficky Frames and some of these events come into play, because we need to do a better job on the business side at making connections, for sure. And that's partly what these film festivals help with as well. But we'd certainly, open to and take anyone's advice on ideas going forward, because yes, I take your point, and we have a little bit of work to do.
I would just add that one of the answers will be streaming. So Canadian films are often available in India on Netflix, on Amazon, on other streaming services, and you can find them there maybe a little bit more easily than you will be able to do in commercial theaters. In fact, your films might, if they're not already, soon be on these streaming services.
There's a photo opportunity now, so if you can come. And I'd also like to announce that there's another press conference today at 5 o'clock in the Media Center. This is on FTII, and Mr. Subhash Ghai, and FTII Director, will be present. So please attend that press conference. Then just check with Mr. Ratnam, because we were given for time for press conference. Okay, I'll just speak.